morning or afternoon or something like that. I heard you all got up into headless headstand. The first group ever that everybody got up, okay? First group ever. Hey, if you see people wanting to get in, please let me know, because not everybody's here, okay? So well done. That's very well done. Okay, how are you all feeling? Are you okay? Okay, all right, good. I hear from Taryn and from Laura that you're all quite nervous about the amount of work you've got to hand in. Yes? Anna's quietly nodding in the corner. Okay.
Spokesperson for that one.
Sorry, Candace, sorry?
I think I was the spokesperson for that.
Okay, so wait, hang on, I've got to just let the waiting room people in. Here we go. Okay, so it is a lot of work, okay? It really is, we get that, okay? But because we've got a limited amount of time in the course, we've got to get you to do the work at a certain amount of time. Because after this weekend coming up, you've got your pose analysis is due, your 3 poses, your peak pose sequencing template, okay? So that's 14 to 16 poses on your sequencing template, and your teaching practical is done, okay? The first one. But then after that, the biggest thing that you guys have to do, the thing that takes us the longest to get right, is your full sequence, okay? So these things that are coming next weekend, other than the teaching practical video, are literally to prepare you for doing that full sequence, okay? So what we're doing is moving you towards that big piece of work, okay? So we need you to, so tell me, has everybody been able to choose 3 poses for their pose analysis and also have one of those poses be your peak pose sequencing pose? Raquel, yes, you have, or you want to say something? You have, okay? So this is what I would strongly suggest, because you know what the pose analysis looks like, right? You've got to break the pose down into strength, flexibility, skill requirements, and look at your body, all right? Now, if one of those poses is your peak pose sequencing pose, you're already halfway there to breaking, knowing what you require for your peak pose sequencing pose, okay? And then for your peak pose sequencing, that you're only doing the template, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today, how to work through that template. So basically, the long and short of it is you have to choose a pose, a complex pose, send it to me, okay? I'll say yes or no. Some of you've already done that, okay? I'll say yes or no, and then you will literally fill in that A4 page, okay? Does everybody know where that page is, that template page?
Yeah.
Yes, no, okay? It's in your course overview, all right? And it basically, it's like pose analysis. First, the first section is like your pose analysis. What flexibility does this pose require? What strength requirements does the pose have? What's going to get tired in the pose, right? All of those questions, exactly the same questions as your pose analysis, okay? Except in your pose analysis, you're trying to work out why you are having difficulty with the pose and how to work on it as a little bit of an added extra. So it's teaching you, I must just admit so, it's teaching you to see a little bit more, but it's fundamentally the same thing, right? Okay, so you're going to break down, we're going to run through the poses today, like the big categories of poses. You're going to break down the pose and you're going to put it, literally choose 12, maybe more, let's go 12 to 16 poses that are going to be progressive, working towards your sequence. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to transition. You don't have to do anything else. You've just got to go, okay, my pose is a big hamstring flexibility pose. That's what it requires the most of, because in that template, you're going to rate it out of 5, right? Remember that. We chatted about that. So you're going to look at your pose and go, oh, wow, that pose requires 5 out of 5 in flexibility. There you have your sequence. That is the answer to your sequence, right? When you rate those poses, that's the answer to your sequence. When you go, oh my word, I want to do, I don't know what it's called in English. I think it's called tortoise, Kurmasana, okay? So Kurmasana, not that you have to do this, Kurmasana is like wide-legged forward fold, except you put your legs behind your head, right? So if I was to rate that pose, I'd go hamstrings, maybe some inner groin adductor, 5 out of 5, 10 out of 5, right? Strength, nothing. Skill, a little bit. Where do you put stuff? How's it going to go about? That's your sequence. Hamstrings, right? And it's up to you how and what you choose to do in terms of the hamstring poses that you choose, okay? So it's going to guide you. And you've got in your manual pictures of poses, right? Lots of them. So you've got a one-legged forward bend section that has got, I can't remember how many, 2-3 pages of, well, not pages, but little pictures, probably 20 to 30 poses that you can go, oh, my pose is a one-legged hamstring forward bend. I'll choose that, and that, and then some others that you can make up yourself, right? And you're going to choose them progressively, right? So in your anatomy work too, you had to do 5 hamstring poses progressively, right? Starting from the easiest to the hardest. And that's what you have to do in your sequence too, okay? You can't start with splits. It's not going to work. You have to start with an easier hamstring pose and then work up to splits, okay? So that, I really want you to concentrate on filling out that little bit on top before you start choosing poses. Because if you get that right, and you can send that to me before it's due if you want to, just to double check if you're confused, or send me a WhatsApp saying, I'm doing this pose, and I think out of 5, I'm looking at, this is a big hips external rotation flexibility pose. Am I on the right track? And I will go, yes. And then off you go, right? Because once you've got that right, you just go to your manual and look at the poses, okay? And then next to each pose that you've chosen, you've got to write in why you've chosen it. So if I was looking at Kurmasana with my feet behind my head and I put in wide-legged forward fold, the reason would be hamstrings, right? If I put in something like compass, does everybody know what compass is? Where I'm taking my leg behind my shoulder, I can put in hamstrings and skill, where to put my leg on my shoulders, right? That kind of thing. So you're just putting in the reason next to it. And most of you, in fact, all of you, have done the anatomy work so well. And I promise you, we're really not exaggerating. This is, I am making you do way more anatomy work early in the course than I've ever done with any other course, right? We're making you do more so that when you get to pose analysis and peak pose sequencing, it's easier for you to understand, okay? And remember, it's a process, okay? You're not expected to hand in, you're not getting marked. You know, I'm not giving you sort of like, I don't know, out of 5, you get 3 out of 5 or whatever, and you have to get 2.5 to pass. What I'm looking for is for you to show me your understanding. That's what I'm looking for. You know, by the time, I promise you, by the time you finish this, you will have produced a sequence that is a really damn good sequence, okay? But in the process, I might say to you, you know, Hader, actually, you've got, you know, that pose and that pose, I can't see why they're in. And then you'll have to go back and go, Okay, I get that now. I'm going to change them, and then you'll send it back to me. Okay, and we go through this process, kind of like the anatomy work, where when I say to you, okay, this is great, and really, all of you, it's really, really good. And then there's some stuff where I have to go, you know, can you go back and rethink that one? Have a look at that one. You're saying that. Have a think about it again, and then you go back and you fix it. Okay, so it works like that. Right? You fix it. It's the same thing with Taryn's practical, okay? She's looking for you to get experience teaching, standing up and teaching. She's not looking for you to be an expert teacher, because you're not one yet, okay? She's looking for you to go, I've done the work, I've memorized my sequence, I'm trying really hard, I'm a bit nervous, I talk to you quite, and then she will say, you know what, Sarah, maybe your voice is a little bit too quiet, or I couldn't really see you. For your next practical, you need to fix this. Or what she will also do, which I know she's put in the instructions, she will send the video, not send the video back to you, say, look at your video around 10 to 15 minutes. What do you see that you could maybe improve on for next time? And then you'll go back and look at the video and go, oh, wow, I was looking at the wall and not my person. Okay? Or you couldn't hear me properly. Or I was demonstrating with my back toward, or something. You know what I mean? So you'll go and you'll just get better. So it is work, I get it, but remember that it's a process, okay? It's just us doing this back and forth and back and forth. And if we were in the studio, we'd be doing a lot of this right now. I would go through, every one of you I would go through your chosen pose, and then you would say to me, I think I rate it like this, I think it's out of this, and then I'd say yes, and then the next session you'd have all your template poses done, and I would go around the room to every single person and go, okay, that's right, that's not, maybe rethink that. And so we're just doing the same thing by email, basically, at the end of the day. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any general questions before I bore you to death with peak pose stuff? No? All quiet. Okay, so today, peak pose sequencing. Just a general overview of it all. Think about what your pose is, or what you think you might want to do, and then pick out what I'm saying to you about the general categories, okay? So the first thing with peak pose sequencing is, hopefully you've all watched the video, is that what we want to create is a class that pretty much everybody can do 95% of the poses, okay? I don't mean that you have to go out there and teach some hectic arm balance or headstand. The reason you have to choose a complex pose is so that I can see that you can break things down. You know, if you're just choosing standing splits, we've got nothing to say. You know, it's like, okay, it's a hamstring pose, check your leg up in the air, do 10 of those. You can't, it's very difficult to sequence when you don't have a purpose. And this is what happens when people go out there. Bev will come on and it will teach you some modern vinyasa techniques, which is basically throwing a whole load of poses together and, you know, and out they go. Very basic poses. There's much more transition work. But she said she teaches on a lot of other 200 hours as well. And she doesn't teach sequencing or anatomy or anything like that. No one gets taught sequencing, okay? No, literally no one. She said one of the courses that she teaches on, they have to put together a 15-minute sequence, 15 minutes, and they get it wrong. And then they just leave it. So this is really challenging work, but this is the work that yoga teachers cry about later on when you're actually a teacher, okay? Because they don't know how to do it. So then they end up copying somebody's work, which is absolutely fine. Go for that. It's a good thing to do, okay? Because nothing's original anyway. But sooner or later, if you want to be a good teacher and a popular teacher, you have to sequence. You have to be able to put classes together for older people, for beginners, for all-rounded hot yoga type stuff, modern vinyasa, peak pose sequencing. And unless you have a purpose, it makes it really hard to come up with new stuff, because you have to come up with new stuff. That's the thing. You know that when it's even modern vinyasa, you go and, you know, if they do come up with new stuff, it's all very similar. You know, it's the same poses, but kind of mushed about a bit. But the whole thing is they have to come up with new stuff all the time and new putting things together. So I'm hoping all of you are following Jenny Rowlings, okay? Because she comes up with little new sequences every day. At sometimes there's some prop work in it, which may or may not be your thing. It's not, I like prop work, but I don't like slidey blanket work, a little bit, not so much. But it's there to give you ideas, because teachers are desperate for ideas out there, because it's what sells you as a teacher, right? Pretty much. So you've got all these different ways of focusing your work. So I always threaten to show, and I will show you next week, my sequences I have, there's probably a file like this, okay? Laura too. All written on scraps of paper, because I don't do P-pose sequencing templates. You know, you can't do that, because think about how you're going to teach your first time, right? You can't go in there with A4 pages of notes. You're not allowed. You've got to know. So when you work with P-pose sequencing, after a while, you understand things, and you can go, I can say to you, okay, give me 10 hip external rotation poses, and you'll just know them. You'll just say, warrior 2, triangle, pigeon. You know, you'll just be able to throw them all out and throw them all together in a sequence. Okay, so it's helpful for that kind of thing. I did my 500 hour with Jason Crandall, which you've seen in the videos and the books. And stupidly, because we're going to put a big sequencing section together on our membership website for the teachers. It's a thing I'll talk to you about later. And I redid his sequencing course. It's got no information in it. It's like, but literally probably 1,000 teachers did that course. Teachers, they're all teachers already. They did that course because they are so lost when it comes to sequencing. Okay, so it's really important stuff. And you guys are going to be way ahead of the curve going out there and understanding how to sequence. Plus also, I don't know if I've said this already, but what the groups tend to do is at the end of it, some kind trainee or teacher by then puts together a Dropbox thing and you all share your sequences. So you'll go away with 19 sequences that I've approved, okay? Plus the 3 or 4 from Wellness Connection. Bev will also give you a modern vinyasa sequence. So you sit in and thank you, 25 sequences that you can adapt, okay? So talking about adapting, right? So all of the sequences fall into these really big categories, right? Inversions, back bends, arm balances, forward folds, and a bit of hip external rotation, okay? Those are the big categories of poses. Within that, when you create your sequence, those sequences are adaptable. So it means that because you know that lying on your back and doing a hamstring stretch pose is really the easiest pose, then there's a whole load of other hamstring easy poses. And you also know that dances, full Natarajanasana and splits are like the crazy hamstring poses. And you can also do them in a handstand, right? So you've got this huge spectrum of poses, but fundamentally, they're all hamstring poses, right? Pretty much. Hamstring poses maybe with an arm balance, hamstring poses with sort of a back bend attack, and a really easy hamstring pose. So all you have to do when you start to teach is adapt. So if you're teaching complete beginners or people who aren't fit, your hamstring poses are going to be way easier, way slower. You're going to start way at the beginning, so lying on your back, like a little bit of a stretch, all of that kind of stuff, right? But if you're teaching intermediate to advanced people, if you're teaching splits, you're not going to start with a hamstring lying on your back stretch. You don't have time for that. These are people you're teaching splits to. So your first hamstring pose is probably going to be something like pyramid. Like, why bother lying on your back? Because you're not going to be teaching splits to beginners who can't do, some of them who actually can do splits. So we shouldn't say that about beginners, but this is a punchy sequence that you're doing, right? So if your peak pose was, Utthita Hastha Gustasana, so extended nose to knee pose, you know, where you're taking your leg, standing balance, leg up in the air, out to the side, back again, that's your peak pose. It's still a one-legged hamstring pose, but it's way easier than splits, okay? So you're gonna start, then you can start lying on your back if that's kind of your thing. Like, I'm not a big fan of lying on the back with hamstring stretches because I like to be warm when I want warmth, I want movement for my hamstrings. But a lot of other people just love a bit of a lying on the back hamstring thing. So your poses are adaptable, okay? So I can do, let's go into categories now. Inversions, you did that this morning, right? We've got to rate the inversions. So there's strength, there's flexibility, and there's skill, right? What do you think is the biggest thing for inversions of those three categories?
Skill.
Skill. Yes, skill, right? You want to balance upside down. Skill is way the biggest thing. So when you rate your inversion, you know, in your peak pose template, skill is going to be 5 out of 5. It's by far the biggest category, right? We know that we need a little bit of strength for inversions, but you also know that we can't build up that strength in the class, okay? Because what's going to happen, like this morning, you guys did headless headstand and you did the whole thing at the wall and all of those things. What's going to happen if you teach a class where you're doing dolphin after dolphin after dolphin, chaturanga, by the time you get to the inversion? You're going to get tired. Too tired. And quite rightly so, like I say in the video, it's my pet hate. It makes me mad when people put dolphin in as a prep pose. Do not put dolphin in as a prep pose. Dolphin is an option, okay? So dolphin is an option for people who don't want to kick up in a headless headstand, okay? So they're at the wall and the people are going, are you crazy? There is no way I'm kicking up. You can give dolphin as an option. Personally, I think it's a crap option. I think it's much better to turn the person around and have them walk up the wall facing the wall, because at least then they're actually upside down. So yay, you've got your inversion going. The person's building up proper strength for the inversion and not like dumping into horrid dolphin. So, but dolphin's an option, okay? So inversion, skill, right? Strength, yes, but we can't build it in a class, right? But as teachers, we would also like to go, hey, I'd like to teach headless headstand today. How am I going to assess my people? Like, how am I going to assess that they've got some arm strength? So remember, we talked about this last week. How can we do that? How can we assess and not kill them, but assess our students to see, you know what, they've got enough arm strength.
Was it plank?
Yeah. Yes, yeah, plank is great, Julie. So plank, forearm plank, side plank, any of those things, even, and I'm sure you've all had this experience, even the ability to hold a downward dog shows strength, right? I'm sure most of you, I don't know if you've ever been to classes where they make you hold downward dog for a long time, or you've done a lot of downward dogs and you're like, oh, no more, don't make me, you know, it's tiring, right? Especially the first time you do it, you're like, oh. I used to, my second kind of yoga experience was Ashtanga yoga, my second teacher training thingy. And in Ashtanga yoga, you do endless sun salutations. So between every single pose, it's 2 hours long, the session, primary series, and you do downward dogs between you start doing 10 proper sun salutations and you hold. And by the 10th one, you're like, oh, I'm absolutely finished, okay? So you can see just from that we actually want to assess our people, because you wouldn't want to, You wouldn't want to offer headless headstand or handstand to, say, middle-aged women who hadn't actually done any exercise for 20 years, okay? Because, and we would need to assess that. We'd need to go, okay, we want to get them there. But if they can't hold a downward dog for 5 breaths or a plank for 10 seconds, whatever, you can't go there, all right? So that's the strength element of the pose. And then what else what do you think about flexibility? And you answered this in your anatomy work. How much flexibility requirement do we need for inversions? A lot. Nicole, I can just see you mouthing. 3, yeah. You need the flexibility warm up to walk in, to kick up, right? It's helpful. And the problem with inversions, if you've chosen that as your peak pose, is that inversions, the skill requirement is so high. You've also, as a teacher, got the danger element of it as well. So normally with inversions, very seldom are they taught in the middle of the room. There is that, you know, you go to modern vinyasa and then somebody might say, oh, you know, if you can jump up into a handstand, if you can kick up into a handstand. And then those people that are confident do, others just don't, okay? But if you're actually teaching inversions, you've got to workshop it. Have that more of a workshop element. You've got to take it to the wall. You've got to go through progressions. You've got, because you're teaching, so it's a bit of a section at the wall, right? But the people have come for yoga. They've come for a yoga class. So they haven't come for a workshop where you can completely scrap the whole class element, right? You can just warm them up and then make them go to the wall and teach them, you know, what to do with the hands, all of that kind of thing. They've come to a yoga class, so they want to do all the flowy stuff. Okay, they don't mind going to the wall, but they also want that element of flow. And so then we do hamstrings, okay? It's hamstrings with skill work brought into it. So for headless headstand or handstand, what's the skill?
Balance.
Balance, okay, that's it. So balance is the skill. So what do we have to teach our people in order for them to not be able to balance, but help them balance? Skill.
Drishti.
Drishti, focus, right? Okay, we've got to teach them where to look. We've got to teach them where to put their hands or their forearms, depending on what you're doing, how to stack, right? How to push, all of those things. Okay, we're just talking inversions now, not arm balance like stuff. We'll talk about that in a second. So in your, I don't know if I told you guys this last week, I'm not sure. One of teacher training I did, I taught years and years ago. One of the people came up with such a brilliant sequence for inversions, obviously did all the hamstring stuff. But what she decided to do was she wanted to bring in an element of focus, right, into her flow before she got to the wall and did all the things. So she made an entire sequence focusing on, literally on this, okay, a bandha, right? Doesn't have to be a bandha, it could be, but she made a whole sequence out of it, out of just focusing on this. So she did hamstring poses, all those things, but she did things where she'd go into things like Warrior 3, for example, but having the arm out in front and focusing on that point. And so even in Warrior 2, she'd do this and she'd make you look, in fact, and it was a fantastic sequence, really creative. And so she just used that as an overall theme in her sequence. So she did the hamstrings, but then she added looking. Now it could be looking easy, you know, in a plank, lean, look forward. So we talked about it last week. You could be in something like Prasarita, wide-legged forward, standing wide-legged forward fold. You can place the hands down on the ground if you're doing handstand, under your shoulders, focus, look forward, little trap, lean forward, not coming up into anything. You could even make them do a little jump if you want, okay? Forward, Lean forward. So you're bringing in a little bit of what you're going to teach them at the wall, okay? Where to look. So that's the first thing, okay? So in terms, so we've got the hamstring stuff. In terms of what other skill is needed to get into an inversion?
Fear.
Kicking up.
Sorry, Julie, you said?
Kicking up
Kicking
into it.
up. Yes, kicking up, right? So how could we bring kicking up, just a little bit of kicking up, not like actual kicking up, well, for some, yeah. How could we bring kicking up into our flow? Not at the wall, but into our flow.
Jumping from down dog to forward hold.
Right? So you can do little things like that. So literally in downward dog, you can step in slightly with your bent bottom leg, three-legged dog, there's your kick up leg, and then have it being swung up and down and not even moving yet. Flow, a couple of hamstring poses, back you come again, step your leg in, right leg steps in again, take your left leg high, jump, little jumps, jumps even at the same place, jumps forward, etc. All of those things, standing splits, the leg is going up, have it come down again, be creative, think, what does the leg do, the top leg, in handstand? So you can have the leg moving up and down. And then what does the bottom leg do in handstand? Nicole? I can just...
It's straightening, isn't it? Or bending?
It's bending, okay? So the bottom leg is your spring leg. You have to bend it in order to go up. If you do it straight, you'll just go doof, doof, doof. You have to bend it. So you can bring that element, like Stefan says, into your downward dogs. Little jumps forward, little jumps forward. Guess what? You can also bring in the look forward, little jump forward. What about jumping back? But not crazy jumping, one-legged jumping. You can do two-legged if you want to as well, but bearing in mind that most people won't want to jump very, very high because it's scary, but they can still jump, okay? You can still bring that in creatively, right? Into it. So that back leg, thinking about it straight. If you're doing handstand, just go and look at the thousands of stupid videos I've got on my Instagram and I'll give you some ideas of where to do it, okay? So I've never ever, I can't believe how many versions of handstand I've come up with. And just being creative about it. Look at what to do. Find the information. Think about shapes. What are your legs doing? What's the bottom leg doing? What's the top leg doing? Where am I looking? How can I replicate that creatively in a flow? Okay, all right. So what's going to tire in with inversions?
Your wrists and shoulders.
Wrists and shoulders. So let's not bugger them up, right? So let's just do a whole load of hamstring stuff. Let's do a couple of fun jumps. Let's do top leg up. Let's do some skill work. Get the body nice and warm. Have a lot of fun. And then you go to the wall. So if you've chosen an inversion as a peak pose sequence, you have to have a wall section, okay? And that's pretty much what Laura did with you this morning. Okay? So she had you doing a whole load of different versions at the wall. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to do your peak pose is going to be quite a big section, right? It's going to be, okay, come to the wall, walk up the wall, one leg up first, second leg up first, blah, blah, blah. Maybe then turn around and kick up, okay? All of those different, kicking up, fine. Are you still at the wall? Maybe we move to balance. All of those things creatively at the wall. So you'll be breaking it down and helping your people get up, all right? And then we have cool down, right? Cool down for inversions is, as cool down, we try to just neutralize things back. Things are already neutralized back. You don't have to do that in terms of an anatomical thing or a physiological thing because your body just goes back, right? But it's nice sometimes for people to do it. So if we did a whole load of hamstring stretching, don't go stretch out the hamstrings more in your cool down. Okay? Do the opposite, right? Do the opposite of hamstring stretching. Maybe a couple of little bridges, maybe some seated twists. Just simple stuff, neutral poses, that kind of thing. All right? See, it's not complicated. Yeah, and this is, you don't realize what you know already. Okay, it's like if I put you out there on the third weekend compared to another group of 200 hours, they would look at you in awe of what you know already. Okay, seriously, they would just be like, oh, I can't believe I know that. They would know nothing. So I know it's difficult for you to have confidence in it, but you will get this right. I promise you, you really will. All right. Moving on, back bends, okay? Back bends are bending back. We know that, spinal extension. We also know that you can't make somebody's spinal extension better, especially within a class, right? The bone's gonna hit the bone, it's gonna be ow, and that's our biggest element of what will tire, okay? We don't want people's backs going, yeah, oh, it's hurting now, you've done too many back bends. So what do we have to look at with back bends? How can we help the people? What is the biggest joint movement in a pose like wheel and mermaid and Nataraja, full dancers? What is the biggest thing we have to stretch? Not the biggest thing. What's the shoulders? Okay. By far, the biggest thing, and most of you know that you're not all very super flexy like Laura in the back bend. The biggest thing that we have to do is stretch shoulder flexors, okay? Shoulder flexion. So basically, that's when you have your arms up, right? And all of those good juicy things, right? So the greatest, yoga is pretty crap for shoulder stretches, right? Because shoulder stretches require largely quite a lot of pulling and those kind of things. That's helpful. And of course, we don't have that in yoga, right? But you all know from your back bend sequences that the front here gets tight for a lot of people. And we want to warm it up. So it's pec stretches, okay? So that's like all the stuff with your hands interlaced behind your back, those kind of things. Stuff where you're turning away from your arm. So on the floor, if you've got your arm in this shape and you're lying prone and you're turning and twisting, you're going to get lots and lots and lots of pec stretches, okay? That's all of this stuff going mobilizing backwards, all of the interlacing your arm stuff. Then we know that triceps also have a bit of a restriction element in terms of shoulder mobility. So we all know tricep stretches, right? Okay, all your good stuff like this, all your prayer stuff, in child, arms behind your head, all mobilizing, that kind of stuff. And then the front of the shoulders, well, it's all of the shoulders, but the front and the back, your deltoids, this like cup here. So it's all of this stuff, thread the needle. Those kind of movements really help move people's shoulders about. And then lastly, lats. Okay? This bit are probably, besides pecs, your biggest problem in shoulders, because our lats draw our shoulders down. So sometimes when people are, that's why my shoulder flexion is not good. Okay, it's just I've got for a very small girl, very big lats. Okay, so but they draw it down. So we want to do some lat stretches. So that's kind of things like in child's, you're walking your arms to the side and walking arms to that and really reaching out, wild thing. All of those things where you're stretching your lats out. So we'd want to get some shoulder mobilization going in there, right? That's the main area. Then the second area, and somebody said, I'm not sure who it was, quads. So depending on the back bend. So which pose requires more quad stretching, mermaid or wheel? Somebody said something?
Mermaid.
Mermaid. Okay. Yeah, mermaid. It also it depends on the individual. Look, mermaid does require much more quad stretching than wheel does. Wheel, it's not essential to quad stretching. Wheel, you can do it because it gives you guidance to put together a decent sequence. You don't need huge amounts because you're not trying to put your foot on your head. The minute a back bend is trying to put your foot on your head, you know, you go, that's trying to put a foot on their head. That's a quad stretch, right? Wheel, people can have wide wheels. They can have really narrow wheels. And most of the time, the people that have the really narrow wheels, the mobility is coming from their spine, okay? From their, not because their quads are all stretched out, but literally because they can bend in half and their shoulder flexion. There's also a post, I should have actually sent it to you. There's a picture, it's also on the Instagram account, of my wheel and Laura's wheel next to us. And Laura's wheel, you'll see it's probably a foot shorter than mine, like it's narrower, right? And she's able to stack her shoulders above her wrists, even more. In fact, her hands are almost in. Mine's the opposite. Mine's at an angle like that, okay? But I can still do it. I just come up onto my toes and those kind of things. So you don't really need huge quad stretching that. But for mermaid, Natarajatsana, full dancers, Kapotasana, which is where you're on your shins and you drop your head back, right? Those are the big quad stretching poses. So you can see immediately your sequence would be, what is back bend? Do they require more strength or more flexibility? Work.
I would say flexibility.
Flexibility, yes, Candice, flexibility, okay, by far. And definitely some require, sorry, my WhatsApp's going mad. Some require strength. So which requires more strength, wheel or mermaid? Wheel, yes. So you see, so when you're looking at a pose, most of them have much more of one element than the other. So if we look at mermaid, we go flexibility, like front leg and hip external rotation, back legs in extension, you're bringing your foot in, your back needs shoulder, crazy flexibility pose. No strength, okay? Like literally none, okay? Unless you're doing mermaid without holding your foot and just drawing your foot in by its lonesome kind of thing. Whereas wheel requires push-up, right? You have to be able to push up into a wheel. So strength elements would be required in wheel, but not in mermaid, right? Which pose of those back bends, mermaid or wheel, requires more skill?
Intuitively, I say mermaid, but I can't actually back that up without thinking about it a bit more.
Okay, so mermaid definitely needs to be taught, but which one is easier? If you're doing mermaid and you're just reaching back and you're taking hold of your foot and drawing it in, or you're having to put your hands placed like this and then push up into a back bend?
I think the wheel is probably, in terms of skill with wheel, if you don't know exactly how to do it, you can really hurt yourself quite easily. For me now, I used to be quite, with gymnastics, back bends was easy, but now, not having done it in a long time, I would actually have to go quite slowly and get it right, so get the technique right so that I don't hurt myself.
Yeah, so wheel definitely requires more skill, okay? So skill is not just the instructions around the pose, it's the trickiness of understanding the instructions, right? So with mermaids, like if you're reaching back or if you've got a strap, which is definitely more of a technical need to learn how to do it type thing, it doesn't really matter if you sort of pull your leg not doing it right. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can just sort of fix it. But with wheel, you cannot get up. You can't do it unless you understand how to do it. It's one of those tricky poses. And when you go out there and you start teaching, and you may have had that experience yourself, is that I've had this so many times with students, they put their hands here. They've never done anything like that before. And their brain just goes, I have no idea what you want me to do. Like, no idea. Like, they can push like this, but to push like this, it's lying on your back, is a completely like, they don't know what's going on with their feet. So it's a little bit more tricky. So it would require more instruction. Okay. So then you would want to go, okay, I need to push up with the feet. So you could do that in bridge poses, right? You could have the hands placed in a certain way and then just push up in bridge pose. But you have to teach where the hand is placed and the action of pushing. Okay. Whereas mermaid is much more, definitely requires instruction, but doesn't require, it's not tricky. Okay? The strap thing, if you do it properly, is a bit tricky, but it's not really tricky. Everybody will be able to do some version of mermaid, whereas wheel, if you don't get it right for the people or help the people, they won't be able to get into it at all. So it's a little bit more tricky with the skill. Yeah. So what's going to tire in mermaid? Mostly, what's going to tire?
Your back.
Your back. Yes, Alicia. Yes, absolutely. Hands down, your back. You know, your quad might be burning as you're stretching it a lot, but I mean, it may or may not tire or whatever, but your back, right? And I'm sure most of you have had that feeling where you're just like, oh, it's your back. So then we don't want to bring in lots of back bends. We want to do spine mobilization work in your flow. So that stuff, it's also like lateral stretches, so side bends, a little bit of rotation work. So we want to almost relax the back muscles, warm them up a little bit. Lots of yummy child stretches, anything like that. It's not forward bends, okay, but child, where you really are just lengthening things out, warming things up, many little back bends. So, you know, there's classic like cactus arms where you're drawing the shoulder blades together, but you're not bending back like a crazy person. You can let the back benders, if they want to, they can back bend endlessly. But, you know, but all of those juicy things you would want to warm up more for mermaid than for wheel, okay? Because what's going to get tired mostly in wheel as opposed to mermaid?
Your arms.
Your arms, exactly. You guys have got this, right? Okay, so it's your arms. So then we go, okay, we can bring in little back bends and bridges and all of those things in wheel because you're not going to get horribly sore. Nice spinal mobilization, little bridges, but what we wouldn't want to do is kill their arms. Okay, but with lots of dolphins. Know that I hate dolphins. This is my worst one. Okay, so it's, you know, you don't want to tire the arms because that push to get up is hard, especially because most people aren't natural backbenders. Most people are going to find it easier to do things like a little kick to from downward dog, leg up, little jumps forward, those kind of things, way easier than pushing up into an actual back bend. Okay, it's tricky stuff, it's hard. Okay, so again, it's progressive as well. Don't go mad with back bends. Think spine mobilization, so that's your muscles warming up, nice juicy flow, lots of shoulder work, that kind of thing. And then a few little back bends, not a problem at all. Mermaid, that type of back bend pose is way more, oh, my spine. The minute you, in your little template, you say, what's going to get tight? And you go, oh, my back. That says don't do lots of back bends, right? It's really simple. It's like if you're doing a standing one-legged balance type pose as your peak pose, you do not want to do a whole load of standing one-legged balances because you will go, that's what's going to tire, right? So you don't want to go, okay, I'm doing full dances, Nacha Rajasana. Oh, you know what? I'm going to do half dances, Warriors 3, standing splits, Utthita Hasta Panagustasana before you do Nacha Rajasana because your ankles and your legs are going to shout at you. It's fatiguing and that balance is tricky. So those questions are really primed for you to go, it says, I've written this, it says that's going to tire. I best not put a whole load of that in my sequence, right? Okay, any questions around back bends? No? All good? All right, so moving on to, just checking the time, to arm balances. All right, so what's the biggest criteria in arm balances? Strength, skill, or flexibility? Tricky question.
Strength.
Ben?
Carmel, you said flexibility. Strength.
No, strength.
Strength. Okay. So, Titivasana Firefly. More strength or more flexibility?
Flexibility.
It's both, right?
Strength.
And but strength, but it's an arm balance. So yes, Carmel, you're absolutely right. We need arm strength for an arm balance, right? We do need the people to, again, like an inversion, maybe have a bit of strength to be able to do it. But the great thing about arm balances, other than pretty much crow, is that normally people don't fall over in arm balances. They just don't come up, right? So, and even if they fall over, I'll tell you a story in a minute, but even if they fall over, most of the time they don't hurt themselves, okay? So, whereas if you fall over in an inversion, you've got a serious problem, right? It can be a big problem in classes. So, but the arm balances are tricky because it depends on the arm balance, right? So, of all of the poses, the arm balances, some of them, can require 5 out of 5 strength, or maybe 4 out of 5, it's not that strong, okay? 5 out of 5 flexibility, and 5 out of 5 skill, right? So, because in arm balances, we've got the looking forward, leaning forward, where do you put your legs on your arm? Where is your hand going? Firefly, how do you wriggle in? Crow, where is it, where twisted crow, how are you going to get your stuff on the side? So it's a big skill element as well, right? But some of the arm balances we know don't require so much flexibility, right? Depending on the pose. So let's look at flying pigeon, okay? Ekapada Galavasana, right? Flying pigeon. Does everybody know what that is, right? Okay, so what flexibility requirements do we have in flying pigeon? It's always the legs, so we just got to look at the legs.
More in the hips, the rotation of the hips, the external rotation.
Perfect. Okay, that's it. External rotation of the hips. That's what your leg's doing in Firefly, the front leg anyway. External rotation of the hips. Tick. That's my sequence. Hip external rotation poses, right? Sorted. Go to the manual. Look at all the different ones. Make stuff up. Create things. Lie on your back. Stick your leg behind your head. Whatever. I don't care. As long as it's in that shape. Okay? Different poses, progressively. So hip external rotation. Okay? What's the back leg doing?
It's an extension.
It's an extension. So even if you don't know the names of the words like hip extension, just go, the back leg's out to the back in the air, okay? And then go, okay, so that's a strength requirement. In order to hold that leg up in the air, muscles are holding you, right? Really working hard. So your glutes and your hamstrings, but you don't even, you know this already because all of you've got this right in your anatomy stuff. What other pose can I have my leg in the air? Can I mimic that action?
Three-legged dog?
Yes, there you go. So think about it in terms of when you do Ekapada Galavasana, flying pigeon, most of the time, I'm sure Laura's taught it to you this way as well, most of the time if you lean forward and you are able to pick your leg off the floor, so the back leg off the floor, it's in a bent little squat position first. It's almost tucked into your chest, right? It doesn't shoot out. If you shoot your leg out immediately, you will fall because it doesn't work like that. You have to tip slowly, okay? So if we look at exactly that, three-legged dog, extending the leg back, bend the knee, knee to nose, knee to chest, plank, back into three-legged dog. It's the same action. It's exactly the same action with one extra element that I'm not really expecting you to know now. But the minute, it's a tip for you guys, if you are actually working on the pose and can't do it yet, the minute that you tipping allows you to lift the foot just a little bit. Okay, so the foot, back leg foot comes off the floor, right? In order to take the leg back, the longer your legs are, the heavier your legs are, which is girls, basically. Guys are the other way around. They've got shorter legs. Not all girls are like this, but normally we've got much longer legs, pelvis area than our torso. We have to tip quite far, right? Sometimes so far that we feel like our faces, especially with short arms like me, our face is going to smush into the ground. So what we have to do in order for that smushing not to happen and to take the leg back, we have to push really, really, really hard as we start to take the leg back. So push, and then the leg goes back. Okay, that's just a tip. It's quite nice if you're doing flying pigeon, put it in there. Push when you start to take the leg back. So we've worked up, we can mimic that back leg in other poses like three-legged dog, knee to nose, plank, etc., right? We can do it in any pose where we can take the leg back up in the air, right? Any pose. We can do it in Warrior 3. Bring it in, take it back up again. We can do it in floating dances. We can do it in standing splits. We can mix it up, right? Around all of that, okay? So we've worked then, we've got hundreds of hip external rotation poses in yoga. Pretty much almost every pose is a hip external rotation pose. All of your standing poses have, most of them, shouldn't say all, have hip external rotation in them, okay, right? So many seated poses, hip external rotation, okay? You've got hundreds to choose from. You can do them lying on your back. You can do them standing up. You can do a standing figure 4 cradle. You can be as creative as you want to, okay? In the compass, you can do so many poses around that, okay? So in arm balances, the key is, okay, what's going to get tired? Arms.
Your arms.
Your arms, yes, exactly. So we don't want to bugger up the people too much, right? With their arms working hard. We don't want to push them, but we want to give them an idea. So in Firefly, our arms are much straighter, normally, depending on your flexibility, than when we're doing a kind of begin, or let's say Ekapada Galavasana, flying pigeon, or Bakasana, twisted Bakasana. The arms are in what shape, almost? Yes. So what is this shape? What does it look like? What's our main pose where our arms are like that?
Chaturanga.
Chaturanga. Yep. Okay. So, but we don't want to go mad and go, okay, we're going to do 50 chaturangas and then we're going to put you into an arm balance. But we can do chaturanga. We can do kneeling chaturanga. We can do a really slow killer chaturanga. Right down onto your stomach. Come up. Little cobra. Tricep work. Okay. Little bit. Bringing in the elements. Often when we're in arm balances, what I will see frequently with things like especially 8-angle, Astabhakrasana, twisted crow, even crow itself, is people's arms do this. Their elbows flare out, okay? So you can actually bring that into your sequence. You can go, oh, we're doing chaturanga, squeeze the elbows in. You could even do it in a standing pose. This is how creative you can be. You can do like squeeze the elbows in, cactus arms, squeeze the, you can bring it in, okay? The same thing, looking, leaning forward, all of those things you can bring into hundreds of poses depending on what your pose choice is, right? So we've just got to tick those boxes, flexibility, strength work a wee bit because it's arm balances, right? Strength work more in what the legs are doing if the leg is taken out. behind. It's not. So if we look at something like Firefly, as I said, if you really flexi, it requires flexi and small weight-wise. It requires almost no strength, like very little strength. Okay, the less flexi you are, the more strength it requires. Okay, so if we were thinking, oh, you know what, I want to bring in more of that strength element into my Firefly. I'm not just going to do hamstring stuff. I want to do some quad work as well, right? What could I do that would mimic quad work in Firefly? Make it up. Marlene?
You could seated, lifting your legs over your yoga blocks, kind of things.
Exactly. So does everybody know what an L-sit is? So that's when, you know, staff pose, Dandasana, right? Your legs are out in front, your hands are to the side, right? You can push down, right? And lift your bum up. Then you can push down, lift your bum up and lift one leg off the floor. Boat pose, right? Other leg off the floor. You can do it wide. You can do a wide-legged boat pose, right? Wide legs. And it's exactly the same shape as Firefly. You can do exactly what Marlene's saying. And you can start, you can lift your legs wide, not holding them, in wide-legged boat pose, and start to circle the one around and then the other one around, and people will cry and love you for it, because people like that. People are weird. They really like being beaten up quite a lot of the time, not too much, and enough so that they can moan. Okay, but you can replicate those things in other poses and it makes your sequence fun. Okay, any questions about arm balances? You're looking at what the legs are doing and then do that in other stuff. Okay, don't overtire, but do a little bit of strength work and bring skill work into it. Okay, where you put stuff, okay, where you look, etc., how you lean, those kind of things. Any questions about any arm balances? Right? You're all good? Okay, because this is pretty much, we almost done. All right, so then our other main category, or two, put them together, forward folds, hamstring poses, let's call them, and hip external rotation poses. Okay, those are just doing stuff, a lot of stuff. If you want to do splits, you are going to have to bring in a lot of hamstring poses progressively. Okay, get creative with them, because nobody just wants to go forward fold, forward fold. It's boring, right? Lots and lots of hamstring poses in that kind of, in different shapes, different ways, fun ways. Add some load, get creative with it. Okay, so those things, hip external rotation poses like lotus, they are, as I keep saying, there are hundreds of hip external rotation poses. You can kind of do whatever you want, right? You can do seated, standing, forward, lying on your back. You can do, put your leg behind your head. You can do arm balances. You can do anything when it comes to hip external rotation poses. There are hundreds of them in yoga, okay? You can do hip external rotation poses in headless headstand. You can do all sorts of stuff. It's just stuff on top of stuff, okay? So when you choose your peak pose, and I haven't got, I don't think I've got very many people's peak pose, a couple of them, there's a few full dances. Okay, so we're talking about full dances. I spoke a little bit about this last week, right? The first thing is that you need to know is that is one of the hardest yoga poses there is, okay? Other than some crazy handstand stuff that is challenging, right? It's really hard, okay? So you need to start your class at a higher level. Do not start with them lying on your back, stretching your leg, because it's no good. You have a lot of work to do in this pose. So let's break down dances, because it's got an element of pretty much everything in it, almost. Okay, so first and foremost, what is dances?
Back bend.
It's a back bend, yes. And what else is it?
A balance.
It's a balance. Okay, what else is it?
Hip extension.
Is hip extension, definitely, and hip extension and what? What's the bottom leg doing?
Hamstrings.
Hamstring sheep. So you see what this pose is? It's a crazy pose. So we're talking hip flexion, hamstrings, right? Hip extension, splits, that level. In a back bend on one leg. What else is required in terms of extreme flexibility? Yes, Anna. Yeah.
Shoulder flexion.
Crazy shoulder flexion. So your sequence has to cover shoulder flexion, quad stretching, hamstring stretching, spine mobilization, and dances is a highly tricky skill pose because it's a balance, right? So if you are really teaching dances, you can't just all of a sudden have people, most people will have a strap in the middle of the room, hooking their strap onto their foot and then pulling it up in the middle of the air. You're gonna have to go to the wall and you're gonna have to teach them how to put a strap on and then literally stretch them out and work how that strap actually works. Has Laura shown you the flip the grip of a strap? No? Okay, I'm gonna see if I find a video. I just wanna write it down. Okay, because with the strap, there's two different ways of doing it. Where you walk down the strap, which is not really a good way, and where you do a flip the grip. But what I'll do is I'll get a video and then show you exactly how to do it. So you can see the dances is full on, right? So you're really gonna have to warm people up. So people will be working on splits. That will be a prep pose for dancers. That's the level of that. Doesn't mean that they have to be able to do splits. They can be, significantly off the ground. But that's the level of flexibility that is required in the hamstrings and the quads, right? So mermaid, full mermaid, would be a prep for dancers. Right? That's how challenging the pose is, right? Because if you can't, least with full mermaid, you're sitting on the ground, right? Okay? And you can do this. And for the mermaid version that you guys are doing, you're doing it with the leg in pigeon at the front, right? So you're not doing it the splits version, of which there is one. I think I told you guys last week. Ekapada Raja Kapotasana 4 is in splits, and you've got your foot on your head. Okay, so it's a huge pose and requires. It's fun to work with because you've got lots of stuff to do. Julie.
Would you not do a lot of balances because then you're going to tire out the legs?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is really almost no reason to do the balances because full dances is such a tricky pose in terms of just getting into the back bend, into the pose with that most people would be doing it in a workshopped way. They'd be at the wall trying to get themselves into that. And then I'll send you a video. I've got to send you this video of one of my 500-hour teachers. And then the people that can do the pose without the wall, of which 99% of people will not be able to do, they will just do it. Okay. This teacher, Kaya Bryce, she on the 500 hours ages ago, and I don't do it anymore, but I used to make them put a workshop together for their fellow teachers. And she chose full dancers, and she went through this 2-hour workshop, did it all, took them to the wall, warmed them up, did this quad stretching, whatever. And then I'd never seen her do the pose. I hadn't taught it to them. And everybody was at the wall. And then she said, do you always have to teach it at the wall and, with a certain way of flipping the grip? And I said, yeah, for most people, whatever. And I said, why? How do you do it? And she just stood chatting to me and went like this with her hands. Back leg just came up and she just took hold of it like that. And I've never seen anybody do it like that. And she said, she doesn't know why she can do it. She just that's kind of like how she did. She never learned the pose. She just does this. And the pose is there. So to answer your question, Julie, those people that can do that, of which if you're lucky, you'll see like 2 in your life, you know, they'll just do it. They'll go, you'll see immediately that they will not need a strap. They'll just go, and they'll be at the wall, and then you'll go, oh, that person can just balance, you know, it's fine. I'll send you the video, because I've never seen it done so stably in my life. So, yeah. So, but for everybody else, for us normal people out there, yes, you know, you don't want to tire. All right. Okay. So, lastly, you've got your 16 poses, all right, your little template, and you're going to put them down, and you're going to put down why they're in, right? What you need to do is think a little bit outside the box, depending on what pose you've chosen, right? So if you've chosen hurdlers, flying hurdlers 2, which is splits on your arms, for example, okay? Of course, I know you need hamstring work, and you need quad work. You also need skill work, and you also need, you know, so you kind of need to not combine poses, but add elements onto poses. Does that make sense? So it's like, so in other words, you can't do a thing where you're going, okay, pyramid pose stretch, half lunge, not half lunge, what do you call it? Low Anjaneyasana, low lunge, into half splits, you know, that kind of thing. You're going to have to do low lunge, half splits, lean forward, drishti. Okay, so it's like adding elements onto it. It's the same thing when you're doing back bends and you're doing shoulder flexion work. Okay, so I don't want one pose being, I'm just doing this with my arms, right? I want an actual pose, and you're adding the arm elements onto it. Kind of like when you think about something like warrior, maybe kind of like quad works-ish for wheel pose, but then you do humble warrior. So that's your arms interlaced behind your back. That's doing your pec work, and you're doing a bit of quad work at the same time. Does that make sense? So you're adding elements on to your poses. So they're not strict poses, because you're trying to be creative. Okay? So adding whatever it is that you need to add, and that is normally skill and strength work can get added onto flexibility poses, because most of our sequencing is flexibility, right? It's very tricky to sequence for a non-flexible pose, because we tire people out too much, and we can't keep doing strength. But you can totally have a strength class, just not with this homework that you're doing. You know, you can really mess people up with strength, and they can go home and love you because people do like it. So, but normally you've got strength and you've got skill, right? Strength, we can't beat people up a lot, so that kind of takes that out, but we want to bring elements of it into our class, right? A little bit of action as well. All right. Any questions about the template, the pose analysis, anything about peak pose sequencing? You've got me for 15 minutes, or I can just let you go if you've got no questions. No questions? You're all good? You're all sorted with your poses? Sure? Have you all chosen your poses? Ish. Okay. The quicker you do it, the quicker you'll get started. Okay. So, you know, really, if you can do it earlier than, is it Monday it's due? I'm not sure. Tuesday. I can't remember. 4th, whenever that day is. Okay. So, the quicker you do it, the easier it's going to be. And especially for your peak pose. Your pose analysis is like, it doesn't really matter, but your peak pose stuff, you know, try and think about it. And if you really want to kind of make your time work for you, then just send me, I'm going to get you now, Raquel, and just send me your pose and say, I just want to run this past you. What I'm seeing in Ekapada Galavasana flying pigeon is flexibility, hip external rotation, 5, strength work, back leg, maybe 2, skill work, quite a lot, 5. Is that right? And I'll go, yes, that's right. Okay, and then you know, then you won't waste your time getting it all wrong. Okay, Raquel.
I think think you kind of answered it. So basically, I think it's due tomorrow, by the way. It's due tomorrow. Do we just tell you the pose that we want to do, or do you want more detail from us?
It's entirely up to you, okay? So if you want to just tell me the pose and you're happy with how you've broken down the pose, and I know some of you are like very knowledgeable anatomy-wise, all good. If you in doubt, then tell me a little bit more, and then I can just look and go, yes, no, you're definitely on the right track. So it's entirely up to you. Now, what I want to be very clear on, please do not add transitions. And I know you're probably all thinking, no way, I don't have time to add transitions, but some people will give me their template and the transitions will be in already. It's a lot of work. And then I have to go, that pose doesn't count, that pose doesn't count, that pose doesn't count. And they have spent a day working on it. Just keep to that template. Answer all of those questions, do it exactly like that, okay? Because it's going to be easier for you. And then the transitions, you're just going to add them in. It's like whatever you want to do. It's entirely up to you. On the videos, and then Bev will also talk to you about it, there are hundreds of different transitions. It depends on how you want to teach, right? I find transitions tediously dull, right? So I obviously do transitions, but my transitions are more like actual poses. So it's different. You may be this, like a ballet dancer who just loves the choreography. Laura loves it all. I go, oh no, not another sissy squat. She loves it all. And that's how she wants to teach. And that's the key to becoming a good teacher, is to embrace who you are, you know, and that's totally cool. Otherwise we'd have all yoga teachers like me, all yelly and, you know, making people get strong all the time. You know, people like that dance and the flow. And whether you want to do the running around the mat back and forth, do that. If you don't want to, and you say, you know what, I'm going to teach I'd like to teach in this local studio I go to, they just do very basic vinyasa to warm up. Also totally cool. Yeah, it's up to you what to think about who you are, what you like, and kind of the studios that you might like, that kind of thing. You know, if you want to be like Laura, you can transition. She loves it. It's like her best thing. I think she likes the transition better than the poses. So it's, you know, do whatever you want. There's a list of them. All you've got to do, and we'll talk about that next weekend, which I probably won't have to see you a lot because I think you'll be way on the journey next weekend, is all you have to do is just make it work in terms of progression. Like if I can see, okay, hang on a second, you said butterfly with lateral side flexions. Next pose is, I'm trying to think of one. Next pose is reverse triangle. I'm like, huh? How are you going to get from butterfly to reverse triangle? And then your transition is going to have to be quite long and lengthy and probably involve a whole load of other poses and whatever to get to that. So it's much more just about it working, right? And if you like the front of the mat, back of the mat stuff, go for it. It's entirely up to you. Okay. Carmel.
Sorry, Catherine, I just wanted to reconfirm that the peak pose sequence can be any one of our 3 pose analysis.
Yes.
The 3 poses we've chosen for the 3 pose analysis.
Yes, it can.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then just to be very clear, you cannot choose a pose that we're teaching you in the sequences that we've given you, right? You cannot do Bakasana, you cannot do Warrior 3, okay? And you can't do Mermaid, right? Those are the 3 ones because we've kind of taught you. Oh, and Firefly, okay? Because Firefly, we've kind of given you everything about Firefly, right? Okay. Do you know what? If you really, really want to teach Firefly and you can come up with totally different stuff than what I've blabbed on about in the videos, then you can. If you go, you know what, I've in my head, I've had this fantastic, interesting sequence, then just let me know and then you can do it. But just, you know, this is not about you coming up with like the perfect sequence. This is you thinking. I want you to think. I want you to be more intelligent by the end of the course. Right? This is the point. Carmel, you had your hand up?
Sorry, yeah. So I've actually chosen Mermaid as one of my 3 pose analysis, but mostly because it's testing my own body and my back bends are really weak. So would it be okay for me to do a sequence on that? But as long as it's an original sequence.
Not mermaid. You can't do a sequence on
Okay.
mermaid, but you can have it as your pose as a pose analysis. One of your
Okay.
poses. Okay, you can have any pose, as long as Laura says it's fine, as your pose analysis. You just can't have those 3 poses for your peak pose sequence. Look at that puppy, Alicia's puppy. It's like hanging upside down. Look at it. Oh, that's so cute. Yes, yeah. So you can't have that as, you can't have those 3 poses as your peak poses. Okay, Hader?
So the 3 sequences, or the 3 pose sequences that we need to work out, so it's pretty much like the ones that we are going to have to do in the video for our first and second sequences, right? But using different poses as examples. So maybe using, I don't know, like full dances or whatever. So you'll start with comfy seated and, go through, put the strap away, go through the whole sequence. Is that we need to write all of that out, like what we've got over here.
But not for this week, okay? Not for this week. Okay, this week is just the peak pose sequence template. It's in your course overview. It's not in your manual. Okay, find it, because that's an A4 page that you have to fill in. It's in your course overview. Then right after that, in your course overview is exactly how I want you to do your sequence with transitions. It's in your course overview. It's really described, like you'll see it exactly as I want it and it's not just for me. Well, it isn't for me at all. It's much more because I'm trying to make it very structured, so it'll guide you to an easier, let's say, easier way of doing it. Okay? But it's in your course overview, not in your manual. Okay. Any other questions?
So the one in the course overview, sorry, Catherine. The one in the course overview, it says pose analysis, and then it's got the full dancer pose with the flexibility, strength, skills.
Okay, so which
Am I
one?
confused?
Pose analysis and peak pose sequence they're 2 different things. Okay.
Yeah.
The pose analysis are your 3 poses.
Yes.
And in that course overview as well, they're examples of other students who put poses together. Those are your 3 poses. They can be anything at all, right? As long as Laura says it's fine. Okay, she's the key to those pose analysis. Then you're going to take pictures of yourself, do kind of an idea. There's also a couple of examples in the videos, and there's a couple of examples in the manual. That's the pose analysis. The peak pose is a totally different section. That can be one of your poses. The 3 poses you choose for your analysis can be the pose that you choose for your peak pose sequence, okay? But it cannot be Bakasana, Mermaid, or Warrior 3. Okay? Warrior 3 is too easy anyway, okay? And then that is also in your course overview. So if you look at those, they're 2 different sections. There are 2 different ways of presenting. In the pose analysis, you can be as creative as you want. I need to see pictures. That's the main thing, okay? I need to see pictures of you doing stuff and you going, this is why I can't do stuff, okay? And this is what I'm trying to do, and oh, it's not working, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's just you looking at you, all right? So have a read through that course overview, those 2 sections, and you'll see it, Hader, you'll see it quite clearly there, exactly what you have to do. Okay, and any questions, just give me a shout, right? Does it make sense, Hader? Do you understand what's going on now?
Yes, and I see it. Pose analysis has got the full dancer pose. It starts off with that, and the peak pose sequence summary template.
That's it.
Yeah, twisted half moon. Yeah.
That's it. So there's an example there for you, just to kind of guide you through it. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure. And just ask if you're confused, right? It's fine to ask, right? The stuff is tricky and you're not there. So, and I haven't got a manual pointing at you, which I'd have in class, so it can get tricky. So ask, it's really not a problem. Okay, any other questions before you go? You're all good. All right, have a very busy week, okay? It's going to be good, but then once you're after this week, right, all you've got to do is add transitions to your pose and do another teaching practice. Okay, so this is it. This is the big week, all right? And then we'll work through it. And then by the second 2 weeks time, you'll literally just one teaching prac and you'll have start adding your transitions in. And it takes time more than it's challenging, right? It's more of that kind of thing. Okay, lovely people, you're doing so well. No, honestly, we love you. Taryn said last time, there's such a nice group. It's such a relief for us as well. So, I mean, you really are fantastic. So you're doing well, and you're really putting a lot of work in. So we're very pleased, very proud, and yeah, and it's actually, we've had a very, very busy year, probably our busiest year ever. And we were like, oh, we've got to do another course. That's really hard. And you've energized us. You've actually energized us and made us think about different things to add and whatever. So we're very grateful. So thank you very much. All right. Have a good week. Send me questions if you need, and then I will see you next weekend. Okay. All right. Bye, guys. Have a good afternoon. Bye.